I flew in from another country for her birthday party after months of planning and expensive travel. My mom denied me in public to all the guests. "This woman is not my daughter, I don't know why she's here." Dad added, "Security should remove her." Then my sister confessed to everyone. She sold our childhood home for $4.5 million and kept every penny for herself. I smiled and froze every account I'd been secretly funding for years. The next morning brought 50 panicked calls, 15 threatening voicemails from my stepfather. I need to get this off my chest because what happened 3 weeks ago has completely changed my life, and I'm still processing it all. This is going to be long, but I promise it's worth the read. For context, I'm Kelsey, 30F, and I've been living in London for the past 4 years working in finance. My family is back in California, my mom Tamara, 52, my stepfather Warren, 55, and my half-sister Taryn, 22. My biological father died when I was 12, and Warren came into the picture when I was 14. Taryn is his daughter from a previous relationship who was 10 at the time. At first, he seemed like a decent guy, but over the years, the dynamics in our family shifted dramatically. Growing up, I was always the responsible one. I got good grades, worked part-time jobs through high school, earned a full scholarship to UC Berkeley, and generally tried to be the daughter my parents could be proud of. Taryn, on the other hand, was the golden child from day one. She was Warren's biological daughter, and it showed in how differently we were treated. While I was expected to work for everything, Taryn got handed opportunities, cars, and financial support without question. The real turning point came when my grandmother passed away 7 years ago. She left me the family home in Palo Alto, a beautiful 1920s craftsman that had been in our family for 3 generations. The house was worth about $2.8 million at the time, but my grandmother specifically left it to me because she knew I valued family history and would take care of it. My mom was furious about this decision, claiming it should have gone to her as the eldest child, but my grandmother's will was ironclad. Here's where things get complicated. I was 23, fresh out of college, and had no idea how to manage a property worth millions. The property taxes alone were about $35,000 annually, nearly $3,000 per month, which was more than my entire entry-level salary after taxes. I was working an entry-level job that barely covered my rent and basic expenses. My mom and Warren offered to help by moving into the house and covering the taxes and maintenance costs while I got on my feet financially. They presented it as a family arrangement, they'd live there, maintain it, and when I was ready, we'd figure out a more permanent solution. What they didn't tell me was that they'd been planning to eventually claim the house through California's adverse possession laws, which require 5 years of continuous occupation. I only found this out later through legal documents I discovered. They'd actually consulted with a lawyer about this strategy before they even offered to help me. Fast forward 3 years. I'd been working my ass off, got promoted twice, and landed the opportunity to transfer to London with a significant salary increase. Before I left, I had multiple conversations with my mom and Warren about the house. They assured me they were taking good care of it and that we discussed the long-term arrangement when I returned for visits. During my first year in London, I started noticing things. My mom would post photos on Facebook of home renovations they were doing. When I asked about these, she brushed me off, saying they were just minor improvements and that I shouldn't worry about it. But the photos showed major kitchen remodeling, bathroom upgrades, and landscaping work that must have cost tens of thousands of dollars. When I came back for Christmas that year, I was shocked. They'd essentially gutted and renovated the entire house. It looked beautiful, but it wasn't the house my grandmother had left me anymore. When I questioned this, Warren got aggressive, claiming they'd invested their own money into improvements and that I should be grateful. My mom backed him up, saying I was being ungrateful and that they were doing me a favor by maintaining my house. The quotes around my house should have been a red flag, but I was young and still believed family meant something. Over the next 2 years, the gaslighting intensified. Whenever I brought up the house, they'd make me feel guilty for abandoning the family by moving to London. They'd say things like, "If you cared about the house, you'd move back," or "We're the ones dealing with all the maintenance and problems while you're living your fancy life abroad." Meanwhile, Taryn was living her best life. She dropped out of college twice, couldn't hold a job for more than 6 months, and was constantly asking for money for various business ventures that never materialized. But somehow, she was driving a new BMW and living in a luxury apartment that I later learned my mom and Warren were paying for. The breaking point came last year when I hired a property management company to do an assessment of the house for insurance purposes. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Not only had they done over $200,000 worth of renovations without my permission, but they'd also taken out a home equity line of credit against the property for $400,000. Through a combination of forged signatures and the fact that they'd been handling all the property paperwork for years, they'd managed to convince the bank to approve the credit line. The forgeries were sophisticated enough that the bank hadn't caught them during their verification process. When I confronted them about this, Warren exploded. He screamed at me over the phone, calling me an ungrateful bitch and saying that after everything they'd done for me, I had some nerve questioning their decisions. My mom, who I'd always had a complicated but loving relationship with, sided with him completely. She told me that if I didn't trust them, maybe I shouldn't consider them family anymore. That conversation broke something in me. I realized that the family I'd been desperately trying to maintain had been using me for years. I spent the next 6 months working with lawyers both in California and London. What I discovered was worse than I'd imagined. They'd not only taken out the second mortgage, but they'd also been claiming me as a dependent on their taxes despite the fact that I hadn't lived with them or received any financial support from them in years. They'd been using my social security number for various financial benefits, and Warren had even tried to have the house transferred to his name through some shady legal maneuvering that thankfully failed due to my grandmother's airtight will. But here's the kicker, and this is where my revenge planning began. While I was dealing with all this legal mess, I discovered that my mom, Warren, and Taryn were in serious financial trouble. Warren's construction business had been failing for years, and they'd been using the equity from my house to fund Taryn's lifestyle and cover their mounting debts. My lawyer advised me to sell the house immediately to prevent further damage. The real estate market in Palo Alto had exploded, and the house was now worth $4.5 million, partly due to their renovations, ironically. After paying off the mortgage they'd taken out and covering legal fees, I walked away with about $3.8 million. I didn't tell them I was selling until after the papers were signed. The phone call was epic. Warren threatened to sue me, saying they'd invested their money into the house and deserved compensation. My mom cried and begged, saying I was destroying the family. Taryn called me a selfish bitch and said I'd stolen her future. But here's what they didn't know, I'd been quietly supporting them financially for months before the sale. When Warren's business started failing, my mom had called me crying, saying they might lose their rental house. They'd moved out of my grandmother's house when I sold it. She didn't directly ask for money, but she painted a picture of impending homelessness and financial ruin. Despite everything they'd done to me, I couldn't stand the thought of my mom being homeless. So I started anonymously paying their rent. I also paid Taryn's car payments when her BMW was about to be repossessed, and I covered several of their utility bills when services were about to be shut off. I did all of this through anonymous online payments and money transfers, and they had no idea it was me. I told myself I was doing it because they were family, and despite everything, I didn't want them to suffer. But I also had a backup plan. I kept detailed records of every payment, and I made sure all the accounts and payment methods were under my control. Now, let's get to the main event, Taryn's 22nd birthday party 3 weeks ago. Taryn had been planning this party for months. She'd rented out an expensive venue in Beverly Hills, hired a catering company, and invited about 150 people. Based on what I could see from the planning posts on social media, this party was easily going to cost $30,000 or more. What killed me was seeing my mom's posts about how proud she was of Taryn for planning such an elegant celebration and how successful Taryn had become. The delusion was staggering, considering Taryn was unemployed and living off the money I was secretly providing. I decided to attend the party. I know this sounds crazy, but I'd been planning my own celebration. You see, I'd been offered a promotion to managing director at my firm in London, a position that came with a salary that would put me in the top 1% of earners in the UK. I was also in a serious relationship with James, an amazing guy I'd been dating for 8 months, and we'd just decided to move in together. I wanted to share this good news with my family, despite everything. I guess part of me still hoped we could repair our relationship. I also wanted to confront them about the financial support I'd been providing and maybe, just maybe, find a way to move forward as a family. I flew from London to LAX, a trip that cost me nearly $2,000 in last-minute first-class tickets. I'd bought Taryn an expensive gift, a designer handbag she'd been posting about wanting for months, which cost me $1,800. I even bought a new dress for the occasion and got my hair and makeup done professionally in Beverly Hills the day of the party. When I arrived at the venue, I could see through the windows that the party was in full swing. The decorations were gorgeous, the guests were dressed to the nines, and there was even a live band playing. For a moment, I felt excited to surprise them and share in Taryn's celebration. I walked in with a huge smile, carrying Taryn's gift and a bottle of expensive champagne I'd brought from London. The first person I saw was my mom, who was holding court with a group of women I didn't recognize, probably Taryn's friends' mothers. "Mom," I called out, walking toward her with my arms open for a hug. The look on her face was something I'll never forget. It wasn't surprise or joy, it was pure panic and anger. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, stepping away from me like I had a contagious disease. "I flew in to surprise Taryn for her birthday," I said, confused by her reaction. "I brought her a gift and wanted to celebrate with everyone." The women around her were staring now, clearly sensing the tension. My mom's face went bright red, and she looked around nervously before speaking loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. This woman is not my daughter. I don't know why she's here. The words hit me like a physical blow. The entire group of women went silent, and I could feel other guests starting to stare. I stood there holding Taryn's gift, feeling my face burn with humiliation. "Mom, what are you talking about?" I said, my voice cracking. "It's me, Kelsey." "I said I don't know you," she repeated, even louder this time. "Security should remove this person from the party." At this point, a crowd was gathering. I could see Taryn across the room, staring at us with wide eyes. Warren appeared at my mom's side, and without missing a beat, he joined in. "Security should remove her," he said, echoing my mom's words. "She's not supposed to be here." I was in complete shock. I'd expected tension, maybe even an argument, but I never imagined they'd publicly deny knowing me. I stood there like an idiot, still holding the gift and champagne, while dozens of party guests stared at this drama unfolding. Then Taryn walked over. For a split second, I thought she might defend me or at least acknowledge that I was her sister. Instead, she looked right at me and delivered the killing blow. "She sold our childhood home for $4.5 million and kept every penny for herself," Taryn announced to the entire crowd. "She stole our family's legacy and abandoned us." The crowd gasped and started murmuring. I could hear fragments of conversations. "She stole their house? What kind of person does that to family? No wonder they don't claim her." I realized in that moment that they'd planned this. They knew I might show up, and they'd crafted this narrative to make me the villain in front of all these people. They were publicly humiliating me to cover their own shame about the financial mess they'd created. Something inside me snapped. All the hurt, anger, and frustration I'd been carrying for years crystallized into a moment of perfect clarity. I looked around at all these strangers judging me based on lies, at my family who'd just disowned me in the most public way possible, and I smiled. Not a fake smile or a nervous smile, but a genuine smile of someone who'd just realized they were finally free. "You're absolutely right, Taryn," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I did sell the house for $4.5 million. And you know what? I earned every penny of it after your parents tried to steal it from me." The crowd was silent now, hanging on every word. "But here's what's really interesting," I continued, pulling out my phone. "I've been anonymously paying your rent for the past 8 months. I've been covering Taryn's car payments, your utility bills, and even some of your grocery expenses." I could see the color drain from Warren's face. "I have all the records right here on my phone. Every bank transfer, every online payment, every bill I've covered while you three have been living beyond your means and telling everyone how successful you are." I started scrolling through my banking app, showing the payment history to some of the guests who'd moved closer. "So since I'm not your daughter, and you don't know me, I guess you won't be needing my financial support anymore." This is where the real revenge began. Right there, in front of 150 party guests, I started canceling everything. I canceled the automatic rent payment that was scheduled to go through in 3 days. I canceled Taryn's car payment that was due the following week. I canceled the utilities payments, the insurance payments, and even the monthly grocery allowance I'd been providing. But the best part? I also canceled the pre-authorized payment for the party venue. You see, when I'd been researching the party planning posts on social media, I'd noticed that Taryn had been vague about how she was paying for such an expensive venue. A little digging revealed that she'd put down a deposit but needed to provide final payment authorization before the party. The venue required a pre-authorized payment that would be processed the morning after the event. I'd suspected that she was planning to figure out the payment later, probably by asking Warren or my mom to cover it. So 2 days before the party, I'd set up the pre-authorized payment myself, thinking it was just another way to help my family even though they didn't deserve it. Well, I canceled that pre-authorization too. Right there at the party, I called my bank and canceled the payment authorization that was set to process the next morning. The look on Taryn's face when I announced this was priceless. "Oh, and Taryn," I said sweetly, "you might want to talk to the venue manager tomorrow morning. The payment authorization for tonight's party has just been canceled. You'll need to provide alternative payment by 10 a.m., or they'll be pursuing collection options." The silence that followed was deafening. Then the chaos began. Taryn started screaming at me, calling me every name in the book. Warren tried to grab my phone, shouting that I was destroying the family. My mom started crying, begging me to stop this madness. But the guests were the best part. Instead of supporting my family, they started backing away. Several people started checking their phones, probably Googling the situation or texting other people about the drama they were witnessing. Others began quietly heading for the exits, clearly not wanting to be associated with whatever financial disaster was unfolding. I walked out of that venue with my head held high, leaving behind the family that had just publicly disowned me. I drove straight to LAX and managed to catch a red-eye flight back to London that same night. The next morning, I woke up in my flat in London to 50 missed calls and 15 voicemails. Most were from Warren, and they were absolutely unhinged. He'd gone from begging me to reconsider, to threatening to sue me, to calling me horrible names, to eventually just screaming incoherently about how I destroyed everything. Meanwhile, Karen had to frantically call Warren at 9 a.m. the next morning when the venue contacted her about the failed payment authorization. They ended up having to put the entire $28,000 venue cost on Warren's already maxed out credit cards, pushing him even further into debt. My mom's messages were more manipulative. She kept saying things like, "I don't know what came over me at the party, and we can work this out as a family, and you're breaking my heart by abandoning us." Taryn's messages were just pure rage. She blamed me for ruining her birthday, for embarrassing her in front of all her friends, and for being a psychotic bitch who couldn't let her family be happy. But here's the thing, I felt incredible. For the first time in years, I felt free. I'd been carrying the weight of their financial irresponsibility and emotional manipulation for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to not be responsible for their problems. The fallout has been swift and brutal for them. Within a week, they'd lost their rental house. Warren's business finally collapsed completely when word got out about the party disaster. Small business communities talk, and this kind of drama spreads fast. Taryn had to move back in with them, but since they were also being evicted, they all ended up staying with Warren's brother in a 2-bedroom apartment. Taryn's BMW was repossessed within 10 days. The utilities in their new temporary housing were shut off twice before Warren's brother took over those bills. And the social media posts about their successful lifestyle abruptly stopped. Meanwhile, I've been thriving. I accepted the promotion to managing director, which came with a 40% salary increase and a signing bonus that was more than my family's annual income. James and I moved into a beautiful flat in Kensington, and we're talking about getting engaged next year. I've also started therapy to deal with the years of manipulation and gaslighting I endured. My therapist has helped me understand that what I experienced was financial abuse, and that my decision to cut them off was not only justified but necessary for my own well-being. The most liberating part has been realizing that I don't owe them anything. For years, I'd been programmed to believe that family comes first, that you support family no matter what, and that cutting off family makes you a terrible person. But my therapist helped me understand that family relationships should be based on mutual respect and love, not exploitation and manipulation. I've had a few people reach out to me since the party, distant relatives and family friends who heard about what happened. Most have been supportive once they learned the full story. It turns out that many people had suspected something was off about my family's financial situation but hadn't wanted to get involved. My mom's sister, Aunt Denise, called me a few weeks after the party. She told me that my mom had been bragging for months about Taryn's successful lifestyle and the expensive birthday party, but that she'd always wondered how they could afford it. When she heard about what happened at the party, she said it all made sense. Aunt Denise also told me something that broke my heart but also validated my decision. She said that my mom had been telling people for months that I was selfish and had abandoned the family after selling the house. She'd been painting me as the villain long before the party, setting the stage for that public humiliation. This revelation made me realize that the party wasn't just a spontaneous reaction to my surprise appearance, it was a calculated move to permanently destroy our relationship while making me look like the bad guy. They'd been planning to cut me out of their lives anyway, but they wanted to do it in a way that preserved their reputation and made me the scapegoat for their financial problems. Warren has continued trying to contact me, alternating between threats and pathetic attempts at reconciliation. Last week, he sent me an email claiming that he'd found evidence that I'd legally taken money from them and that he was going to have me arrested. I forwarded the email to my lawyer, who assured me that Warren has no legal ground to stand on and is likely just desperate. Taryn has been the most persistent in her harassment. She's created fake social media accounts to send me messages. She's tried to contact my work, which failed spectacularly since my company's HR department is very protective of employees, and she even reached out to James through LinkedIn, trying to turn him against me by telling him lies about our family's situation. James's response to Taryn was perfect. He simply replied, "I've heard Kelsey's side of the story, I've seen the evidence, and I support her decision completely. Please don't contact me again." Then he blocked her on all platforms. About 2 weeks after the party disaster, something interesting happened that really showed me how deep their manipulation had gone. I got a call from my old college roommate, Megan, who I hadn't spoken to in over a year. She'd seen some social media posts about the party incident and wanted to check on me. During our conversation, Megan revealed something that made my blood boil. She told me that 6 months earlier, my mom had contacted her through Facebook, claiming that I'd been struggling financially in London and was too proud to ask for help. My mom had spun this elaborate story about how I was working multiple jobs just to make rent and that I was too embarrassed to let the family know how badly I was doing. Megan, being the sweet person she is, had actually sent me a care package and a $200 Visa gift card around Christmas, thinking she was helping me through a rough patch. I'd been so confused when I received it, since Megan and I weren't particularly close anymore, but I just assumed she was being generous during the holidays. Now I realized that my mom had been reaching out to my old friends and acquaintances, painting me as a struggling failure who needed their pity. She'd been systematically damaging my reputation while simultaneously playing the role of the concerned mother who was worried sick about her daughter's well-being. Megan also mentioned that my mom had hinted that if anyone wanted to help me, they could send money directly to her, and she'd make sure I received it without the embarrassment of knowing where it came from. Megan hadn't fallen for that part, thankfully, but it made me wonder how many other people my mom had approached with this scam. I spent the next few days reaching out to old friends, and the pattern became clear. My mom had contacted at least a dozen people from my past, telling each of them a slightly different version of the story about my supposed financial struggles. Some had sent care packages, others had offered to help with job connections, and a few had even asked their own parents if they knew of any opportunities for me. The most heartbreaking part was learning that my high school guidance counselor, Mrs. Ellison, had set up a small scholarship fund at our local community college in my name, thinking that I was struggling so badly that I couldn't afford to continue my education. She donated $1,000 of her own money and had been collecting additional donations from former teachers who remembered me. When I called Mrs. Ellison to explain the truth, she was horrified. She immediately contacted the other donors to explain the situation, and they decided to redirect the scholarship to genuinely needy students. But the fact that my mom had manipulated these wonderful people who cared about me was devastating. This discovery made me realize that the party humiliation wasn't just about cutting me off, it was about covering their tracks. By publicly disowning me and painting me as the villain who stole the family home, they were trying to explain away all the lies they'd been telling about my supposed financial struggles. If I was this terrible person who'd stolen millions of dollars from my own family, then obviously I wasn't the struggling daughter they'd been describing to everyone. It was a way to rewrite history and make themselves look like the victims of my greed rather than the manipulative liars they actually were. Around the same time, I also discovered something else that added another layer to their deception. Remember how I mentioned that Warren's business had been failing? Well, I decided to do some digging into exactly how bad things had gotten for them financially. Using my connections in finance and some publicly available business records, I was able to piece together a clearer picture of their situation. Warren's construction company hadn't just been struggling, it had been operating essentially as a Ponzi scheme for the past 2 years. He'd been taking deposits from new clients to pay for materials and labor on previous projects, constantly staying one step ahead of bankruptcy by bringing in new contracts. But the construction industry in their area had been slowing down, and he was running out of new clients to exploit. The renovations they'd done on my grandmother's house? Those had been practice runs and showcases for Warren's business, but they'd used materials purchased with deposits from paying clients. Essentially, they'd stolen from Warren's customers to improve my house, then used the equity from that house to fund their lifestyle. When I sold the house, I'd unknowingly pulled the rug out from under this entire scheme. Without access to that equity, Warren couldn't continue juggling his debts, and the whole thing collapsed like a house of cards. But here's the really sick part: they'd been planning to eventually claim ownership of the house through adverse possession, then sell it themselves to cover Warren's business debts. My grandmother's house was going to be the final score that saved Warren's failing company and funded their comfortable retirement. My decision to sell the house when I did had prevented them from stealing not just my inheritance, but also the money that belonged to Warren's construction clients. In a weird way, I'd accidentally prevented them from committing an even bigger fraud. I also learned that Taryn's unemployment wasn't just laziness, she'd been fired from her last 3 jobs for stealing. Small amounts, nothing that resulted in criminal charges, but enough to make her essentially unemployable in their area. The business ventures she'd been pursuing were actually multi-level marketing schemes that she'd failed at spectacularly, often losing money instead of making it. The BMW she'd been driving? It wasn't just financed, it was part of a lease agreement that she'd lied on, claiming to have a steady income that didn't exist. When the leasing company had started asking questions, my anonymous car payments had kept them from investigating further. Essentially, I'd been unknowingly enabling not just their lifestyle, but their ongoing deception and fraud. Every payment I'd made had allowed them to continue their lies and avoid facing the consequences of their actions. This realization was both infuriating and liberating. I'd been trying to help what I thought was a family going through temporary financial difficulties, but I'd actually been funding a network of lies, manipulation, and potential criminal activity. The more I learned, the more I understood that cutting them off wasn't just about self-preservation, it was about stopping myself from being an unwitting accomplice to their schemes. But the story gets even more twisted. About 3 weeks after the party, I received a call from an investigator with the California State Contractors License Board. Apparently, several of Warren's former clients had filed complaints about unfinished work and missing deposits, and my name had come up in their investigation. It turned out that Warren had been telling his clients that he had a silent partner who was providing additional funding for their projects, and he'd been using my name and the fact that I worked in finance to make this story more credible. Some clients had even been told that I was personally guaranteeing their projects would be completed. The investigator explained that while I wasn't in any legal trouble, since I'd had no knowledge of or involvement in Warren's business, they needed to verify that I wasn't actually a silent partner. I provided them with all the documentation they needed, including proof that I'd been living in London and had no business relationships with Warren. But learning that Warren had been using my name and reputation to defraud his clients was the final straw. It wasn't enough that they'd stolen my house, manipulated my friends, and publicly humiliated me, they'd also been using my identity to commit fraud. I immediately contacted my lawyer and provided him with all the information about Warren's business practices. While we couldn't pursue criminal charges, that was up to the state investigators, we were able to send a cease and desist letter demanding that Warren stop using my name in any business context. The most recent development happened just yesterday. I received a certified letter from a law firm in California. For a moment, I panicked, thinking Warren had actually followed through on his threats to sue me. But when I opened it, it was something completely different. The letter was from the estate attorney who'd handled my grandmother's will years ago. Apparently, my grandmother had set up a secondary trust that I'd never known about. This trust was designed to mature on my 30th birthday, which is next year, and it contains an additional $500,000 that my grandmother had set aside specifically for me. The letter explained that my grandmother had been worried about my mom's financial management skills and had wanted to ensure that I had additional resources that couldn't be touched by anyone else. She'd structured the trust so that it would only be revealed to me after I'd proven my own financial responsibility and independence. The attorney mentioned that he'd been following the legal disputes over the house sale and was impressed with how I'd handled the situation. He said my grandmother would have been proud of me for standing up for myself and protecting her legacy. But there was more in the letter that absolutely floored me. The attorney explained that my grandmother had actually suspected that my mom and Warren might try to manipulate or defraud me regarding the house. She'd included specific provisions in the secondary trust that would trigger additional investigations if there were any irregular financial activities involving her estate or my inheritance. Apparently, the home equity line of credit that Warren had fraudulently taken out on the house, combined with their attempts to claim adverse possession, had triggered these provisions. My grandmother had literally predicted their behavior and had set up safeguards to protect me from exactly this situation. The attorney also revealed that my grandmother had left detailed letters for me, to be delivered with the trust documents. These letters contained her thoughts about family, money, and the importance of not letting toxic people take advantage of your generosity, lessons that felt incredibly relevant to everything I'd just been through. Reading my grandmother's words felt like getting a hug from beyond the grave. She'd known that I might face these challenges, and she tried to prepare me for them even after she was gone. It was validation that I wasn't crazy, that the manipulation I'd experienced was real, and that my decision to cut ties was not only justified but expected. I haven't told my family about this inheritance yet, and I don't plan to. It's going to be my secret safety net, and it validates my grandmother's faith in me in a way that feels incredibly healing. Looking back on everything that's happened, I'm grateful for that horrific birthday party. It forced me to finally see my family for who they really are and gave me the push I needed to completely cut ties with their toxic behavior. I'm not saying it's been easy. There are still moments when I miss the idea of having a loving family, and I sometimes catch myself wondering if I could have handled things differently. But then I remember standing in that party venue, being publicly humiliated and disowned, and I know I made the right choice. The best revenge isn't just cutting off their financial support, it's living my best life without them. Every success I achieve, every happy moment I have with James, every milestone in my career, is proof that I don't need their approval or manipulation to thrive. I've also started volunteering with a financial literacy program for young adults, helping people my age learn to manage money and recognize financial abuse. It's incredibly fulfilling to help others avoid the manipulation I experienced, and it's turned this negative experience into something positive. As for my family, I have no idea how they're doing now, and I don't want to know. I've blocked them on all social media, changed my phone number, and made it clear to anyone who asks that I don't want updates about their situation. The only thing I regret is waiting so long to stand up for myself. I should have cut them off years ago, the moment I realized they were trying to steal my house. But I suppose I needed to go through this experience to fully understand my own worth and strength. To anyone reading this who might be in a similar situation with toxic family members, you don't owe anyone your financial security, your mental health, or your happiness just because you share DNA. Family should lift you up, not tear you down for their own benefit. Sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself is walk away, even when it's the hardest decision you'll ever make. TLDR, My mom, stepfather, and half-sister tried to steal my inherited house through fraud and adverse possession, then publicly humiliated me at a family party by claiming I wasn't related to them. I responded by immediately cutting off all the anonymous financial support I'd been providing them for months, including the pre-authorized payment for the party itself. They lost their house, car, and business within weeks, while I got promoted and living my best life in London. Sometimes the best revenge is just letting toxic people face the consequences of their own actions. Letting toxic people face the consequences of their own actions.